Welcome to Whisky.com, where fine spirits meet. My name is Horst Lüning, and I'm the master taster of Whisky.com. And today we have the first whiskey from New Zealand here on our cask, but it may be the last whiskey of New Zealand, because this whiskey is from the famous Willowbank distillery, close to none will remember, on the South Island of New Zealand. And this distillery, I've read the history on the back. It's quite well written here on the back, so I will copy this to you. This whiskey was distilled in the legendary Grenadine distillery using the finest local barleys and some of the purest water on earth, snow melt from the southern Alps, filtered naturally through the Great Moss Swamp. This is an exceptionally rare dram from the last remaining stock of what was the world's southernmost distillery. This is it. Join us in reviewing New Zealand's distilling tradition. Whiskey distilling in New Zealand was born with the arrival of Scottish settlers in the 1830s. I think 1838 was the landing date of the Scotch. Many Scots settled in the Otago region, and the industry flourished here until the 1870s, when onerous government regulations effectively shut it down. As always, yeah. A distilling industry gradually re-emerged in the 1950s, and in the 1974 the Baker family opened the Willowbank distillery in Dunedin, producing such popular whiskies as Wilson's and 45 South. A friend of ours has been at the distillery in the year 2003, 4, 5, I do not remember very well. And it was a small enterprise. It was, it didn't look good. It was a dirty place. So I heard then a few years later that it was completely torn down. So there will be no more spirit or whiskey, matured whiskey, from this Willowbank distillery. The world's largest distiller, Seagram's of Canada, then this company was divided between the now biggest alcoholic or whiskey producer in the world, Diageo, and the second one, Pernod Ricard. So distiller Seagram's is already gone. Seagram's of Canada bought Willowbank in the 1980s. The distillery thrived under Seagram's, and its single malt Lammerlaw, named after a nearby mountain range, was highly regarded around the world. I tasted it in the mid-90s and I wasn't impressed. But in 1997, Seagram's sold Willowbank to Australian brewer Foster's, only for them to close the distillery and sell the remaining barrel stocks over time. So I think they shut it down in 1999. The New Zealand Whisky Company bought the last 80,000 liters of cask-strength whiskies in 443 barrels. The whiskey has been quietly maturing in the towering seaside bond store in Oamaru's, it's Maori world, I think, famous heritage precinct ever since. This whiskey was also sold as Lammerlaw and later on as Milford. And I've seen lately a few bottles just called M. So this is the effort to sell those last remaining stocks. The stocks before were put into blends and easily sold, and now this New Zealand Whisky Company collection, how's the company called? No company. Perhaps on the back. Bottled by the New Zealand Whisky Company. Harbour Street, Oamaru, New Zealand. So they try to, well, sell the remaining stocks to a good price as single malt to the market. But they also sell some blended whiskey with Lamellor whiskey in it, so Willowbank whiskey in it. So perhaps the remaining stocks are becoming low, and they try to multiply the whiskey into blends for the name and the heritage. There's a second whiskey on the market. It's a 15-year-old, which matured 5 years in refill ex-bourbon casks, and then was refilled into French red wine casks for 10 years. So this whiskey looks rather red and very intense in color, but I decided to taste the original cask and then finally bottled whiskey from the real production of the distillery, and not a finished new fancy one to have a look at the distillery character and a typical whiskey from this distillery, even if it's very, very old. For a foreign whiskey, a non-Scottish whiskey, this is quite an impressive age. Very few whiskies from countries out of Scotland have this age. Fruit, floral, fruit, floral, fruit. Most of it is fruit. It's quite mild. It's only 40% ABV, so there's no very intense sharp aromas. It's mild, really mild. Even if it's 21 years old. The whiskey is lacking the oak. There's some tropical fruits in it. Yeah, have a sip. Definitely no Scotch. It's fruit. There's no real oak present, no. There's some dryness appearing, like grenadine. There's a little sweetness in the front, and it's quite fresh for a 21-year-old whiskey. But definitely I'm missing the oak. Very, very fruity. Perhaps a faint aroma of coconut from the ex-bourbon casks. Perhaps. So this is not one of my real favorite. This is a solitaire. This might be one of those bottles which you should lay aside and look if they're gaining value or not. This is from the further most southern whiskey distillery of the world. So the distillery lay on the South Island of New Zealand, more in the south than the distilleries in Australia then. I don't know whether the Tasmania whiskey is far south than the Willowbank distillery was. Might be. I don't think so. Well, it might be very difficult to get your fingers on those bottles. There are other bottles, as I said, named Lamellor, named Milford, called just M on it, and those are all from those remaining last casks from the Willowbank distillery when it was torn down. All the casks were sold. Thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned, there's more to come, And feel free to share this video with your friends and discuss this video and this whiskey with us on our forum on Whisky.com.